The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, helping customers make the switch to solar for savings, energy security, and tax incentives. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, a children's book that spanned 3 continents, 4 languages, and 2 ideologies to show kids how different we are not. We'll speak with 2 of the folks involved with the release of the book, Daniel and Ismail, translator Eliezer Nowodworsky, and Ilan Stavans of Restless Books in Amherst, about the transgressive act of showing kids getting along.
We'll also head to Amherst to get ready for the Odenong Pow Wow with organizer Justin Beatty and hear more about unlearning the histories we've been taught so we can better come together as our many communities, and how art forms a framework for the gathering.
But first, oh boy, there's a lot happening with our congressman these days.
So let's check in with him and stop doom scrolling on his Twitter feed.
Ooh, Congressman, you're in trouble.
Unplugged.
You're also top of the fold of like every publication out there right now.
You know what? I stand by what I said, and I was really surprised that they decided to throw a tantrum over this, but you know what? That's their problem.
It's time for our weekly check-in with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Worcester's own Congressman Jim McGovern, who is, as I mentioned, both in trouble and making headlines. This from Politico. Things got heated on the House floor Wednesday after Representative Jim McGovern ran through the list of charges former President Donald Trump is currently facing, including, as McGovern put it, sending hush money payment to a porn star to avoid a sex scandal during his 2016 campaign. House business ground to a halt as Representative Aaron Huchin, Republican of Indiana, tried to get McGovern's remarks struck from the record. Eventually, Representative Jerry Carl, Republican from Alabama, did just that, barring McGovern from speaking on the House floor for the rest of the day. You had to go to the naughty corner. You have a timeout. Then I wake up this morning to historian Heather Cox Richardson in her daily Letters from an American Missive, beginning with Representative Jim McGovern called out his Republican colleagues on the floor of the House today for offering, quote, stunts instead of solutions, extremism over bipartisanship. It's a shame, McGovern said, because the Republicans' narrow majority could have given us a chance to work together in a bipartisan way. Instead, Republicans have caved to their most extreme members who have been, quote, skipping their real job to take day trips to New York to try to undermine Donald Trump's criminal trial. Then she, in her very astute historical way, goes on to connect what happened yesterday, May 22nd, to an event on May 22nd, 1856, 168 years ago, where South Carolina Representative Preston Brooks beat Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner nearly to death on the floor of the Senate after Sumner criticized Southern enslavers. So I'm glad that it didn't go to that extreme yesterday like it did 168 years ago yesterday. But tell us your take on having, quote, your words taken down, as they call it in House of Representatives speak.
Well, I was silenced but not beaten, thank goodness. But in any event, look, I just stated facts. I didn't characterize the charges in a way that said that he was guilty. I just stated facts. And, you mentioned the trial in New York. I also mentioned that he's been charged with mishandling classified materials, the stuff related to January 6th. So I went through the list, and apparently must have hit a nerve with Republicans because they thought this was a breach of protocol, and they asked for my words to be stricken from the record, which I find really ironic because I was trying to make the point that I get admonished for just stating the fact that Donald Trump's on trial. But Republicans can come on the floor and say that the trial in New York involving Donald Trump is a sham and the judge is corrupt and the jury is rigged. That's fine. That's within the House rules, according to them, because we're not in any way reflecting badly on the presumptive nominee. And the parliamentarian who was in the speaker's chair relied on a passage from Jefferson's manual, which we follow here in the House. And this is the quote: in Parliament, to speak irreverently or seditiously against the king is against order, end quote. And I said, Donald Trump might want to be a king, but he's not a king. He's not a presumptive king. He's not even president. He's a presumptive nominee. And I get it. People are trying to follow precedent, but I think the period we're in right now is unprecedented. And to be prevented from acknowledging that, in my opinion, is not appropriate. We have a presumptive nominee for president facing 88 felony counts. That's just not me making it up. That's just the truth.
Well, let me stop you right there,
because I can't acknowledge that before.
Did you go into yesterday's speech with the idea to try to show the hypocrisy between what was allowed to be said on the floor, with the expressed intent of just stating fact. If you read the words that you actually said on the floor, there's not a lot of interpretation about these things. It is a statement of he has been charged 88 times. He has been found liable in a civil suit. All of these types of things that are just statements of what has happened. Did you go into yesterday's speech with the intent of being able to show the House of Representatives that these statements of facts were somehow not allowable?
Well, I went in to point out that when I have said similar things in the past, the speaker, whoever's in the speaker's chair, will admonish me and say, I'm not supposed to say that. And I was trying to make the point that I'm being admonished for saying the facts, that, for example, that Donald Trump's on trial. He's facing 88 felony counts. But yet a Republican go on the floor and say that Donald Trump's trial is a sham and the judge is corrupt and the jury is rigged. I don't understand why they can say that, but I just can't state a simple fact. I just assumed that the speaker would admonish me again, like they have done in the past. Instead, they had a tantrum on the floor and demanded my words be taken down and silencing me for the rest of the day. I think politically, they made a mistake by doing that because it just called more attention to what I said and it forced the clerk to read back all the objectionable words. I thought it was going to be a sentence. It was like a page and a half that the clerk read back of things that they all found objectionable. So they struck the words from the record. History will not reflect I said those things. But the fact of the matter is there's a double standard here. And they are so sensitive about Donald Trump that they are objecting to you even just stating a fact. I mean, you getting on the House floor and saying Donald Trump is on trial right now, they would object to. I think this kind of highlighted the double standard here and the hypocrisy. And I think by making such a big deal of this, they silenced me, they try to cancel me, but they also elevated these words. And I'm under no illusion that every word I utter on the House floor everybody is paying rapt attention to. I got a call from somebody, a friend of mine in London, who heard about it last night. It was over 1 million views on the video that was on display. So whatever, but I'm not going to be silenced. I'm going to say what I believe, and I think they're wrong.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, whose words may be stricken from the record of congressional history, but the first draft of history, the media, has covered it widely. You've not only been critical of Donald Trump this week, you've been critical of your own president when it comes to his policy towards Cuba. You tweeted out, keeping Cuba on the state sponsor of terrorism list continues a failed Cold War policy that adds to the suffer and hunger of everyday Cubans, empowers hardliners, and drives migrants to the U.S. You had a live video conference this week as well in response to this. Talk about your criticism of the Biden administration's relationship to their policy on Cuba.
So I was part of a small group of members of the House and Senate that met with President Obama and Vice President Biden when Obama was president to try to urge him to change our policy toward Cuba. And I went with President Obama to Cuba when he decided to make that change. And getting Cuba off the terrorist list, opening up more opportunities for people to invest in Cuba, the Cuban economy began to do better. People were doing better in Cuba. More political space was opening up in Cuba. All that was good. Trump comes in. He reverses all of that. We go back to the old ways, puts Cuba on the terrorist list, can't explain why. And so before Biden became president, even before he was sworn in, some of us we sent him a letter and talked to him about reversing that policy and going back to the old Obama-Biden policies. He never did. I've been told for almost 4 years now that it's under review, and nothing has changed. And meanwhile, hunger is becoming a bigger problem on the island. Because of being on this list, they are limited to what they can do in terms of trade, not just with us, but even with our European allies, and migration from Cuba, people fleeing, hundreds of thousands of people leaving because they can't feed their families. I've talked to him, and I've talked to the Secretary of State Blinken and the head of our national security, Jake Sullivan, and nothing has changed. And so you know what? We got to call them out publicly. And the deal is, this is wrong. When you are economically starving a country, when you are making it more difficult for people to get food, that is a human rights violation. I support the president. I want him to win re-election, but that doesn't mean that I should just be silent when I think we're doing things that, quite frankly, betray our values.
I do find it ironic that I know when relationships with Cuba were normalized under the Obama administration, it was then Vice President Joe Biden who called to congratulate you for all your hard work on that.
Yeah, he did. In fact, in that meeting we had, Biden was more enthusiastic about changing our policy than Obama was. But, I don't know whether he's making a political calculation, that maybe, this would hurt him in Florida. I don't know. But, at some point, if you win office, everything can't be about a political calculation. Sometimes you need to take advantage of the opportunities you have to make things better, whether it's popular with certain groups or not. And, all this talk of, well, let's see, maybe after the election we might do it. After the election, what if you don't get reelected? You're given this opportunity, use it. And unfortunately, he hasn't.
Adding to the list of people who are appreciative of your policy against Biden on Cuba is one of the people who occupied your office for several days, trying to convince you to do more in what's going on in Gaza. Paki Wieland emailed me specifically to say, if you want to share my appreciation for the congressman, McGovern shared his views on normalizing relationships with Cuba. His determined stand is truly dogged and heroic, and he related the real hunger of the Cuban people for food as well as justice. This is Jim at his best and most courageous. That's Paki Wieland's commitment or response this week on McGoverning with McGovern. Another
very nice.
Interesting sort of polarity, and it brings up the issue of Gaza again. You had a conversation with the very famous and talented actor Mahershala Ali, as well as Amjad Khan, talking about the Muslim community's commitment to interfaith dialogue and peace building in Gaza. And then this week as well, you received an award from a Jewish organization, Maison USA, which is a Jewish response to hunger. I'm interested in how conversations happened in both of those locations and how we can be doing more of this sort of thing. Later in the show today, we have a children's book about a little Muslim boy and a little Jewish boy playing in a yard. It seems like these conversations are important if we really do want to end a famine in Gaza and to see a ceasefire and to see some sort of peace there.
Right. Well, the first meeting, the Muslim community, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in particular, was really about peace building and about trying to move all parties to a ceasefire as soon as possible. Obviously, get the hostages released, get humanitarian in to people in Gaza who are starving right now, but to stop the bombing. And that has to be the first step. And that was what that conversation was about. And sometimes it takes well-known people to get the attention of certain members of Congress. And I'm glad they were up here talking about the realities in Gaza right now. I was told that a lot of people who met with him were talking about his movies, but he was trying to get it back to, what is going on. And on Maison, which is a Jewish response to peace, most of their work is here in the United States. And it's an incredible organization. This organization in particular raised awareness about hunger amongst our veterans and, have done a great deal to make sure that our veterans are getting the support that they need. But look, whether it's Ali or whether it's Maison, these are people and groups that are dedicated to good. And there are a lot of people in this country and around the world who are dedicated to good, and we need to uplift them. I was honored to get the award from Maison, and it meant a great deal to me. And I'm a big fan of the organization and their board and all their staff. They're really quite incredible.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, you were partially responsible for issuing an award to a library in a town we were just in earlier this week on the show, Coleraine. The Griswold Memorial Library won the 2024 National Medal for Museum and Library Service. It's like the Oscars for libraries and museums. Yeah. Tell us about your relationship to that award. I hear, was it you that had nominated them, and what was it about that library?
First of all, we talk about great libraries. It's not just the big, New York Public Library, the Boston Public Library. Some of our libraries and some of our small communities are doing incredible work, reaching out to members of the community, doing innovative things, and basically being a center of a lot of community activity. And I was happy to try to be a cheerleader for the library in Coleraine, and I'm glad that they ended up being recognized. And I think it reminds us how important our libraries are, especially at a time when we have people that are talking about banning books and questioning what happens in libraries. I think they're essential to our country, and, they're a place where everybody, no matter what your background is, no matter, whether you're rich or you're struggling in poverty, there's a place for you at these libraries. So anyway, they're great people, and I'm thrilled that they were recognized.
The show is hoping to go and do a segment, go back to Coleraine and go and hang out at the library there to put more of a focus on that.
I think that'd be wonderful. Yeah, let me know when you do that. I'd like to know.
I will. And you who are listening, if you've got a question or a compliment or a criticism of U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, you can always send it our way to thefab413@nepm.org, or You can tell him to his face, because on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, May 29th, 5:30, if you're from Amherst, Leverett, Pelham, or Shutesbury, you can grab a coffee with your congressman at the Bangs Community Center in Amherst. We'll talk to you next week about what the residents of those towns were interested in talking about at your coffee with the congressman.
And let me just say, anybody's welcome, but we do these little town gatherings a few towns at a time. Otherwise, they become kind of unruly. And we've done one in Hopkinton. We did one in Northridge. And so Amherst is next, but I'm trying to get around to cover all the communities in the next month. So please come, and love to see you. And anyway, it's great to be with you as always.
Thanks as always, Congressman.
Later in the show, we'll bring Israelis and Palestinians together to play soccer in a children's book that is not only bridging a cultural divide in its subject matter, but in its text as well, when we speak with folks involved with the release of Daniel and Ismail.
But next, celebrating our very much living and thriving indigenous communities in Amherst at the Odenong Pow Wow with founder and organizer Justin Beatty.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Odenong is formed from a few different pieces. Ode means heart in Ojibwe. Ode Imen is strawberry. It's called the heartberry because it looks like a little heart. Nong is the locative suffix that you add to a word to say this is the place where this thing is. So Odenong essentially means where our hearts gather. It's also used to mean community or village. Ojibwe is an Algonquin language. The Abenaki folks in Canada, one of their places called Odenong. So the dialectical difference is it ends with AK, but that's what it means. Their village, their place, where they're from, where their hearts gather. So when I was trying to come up with, what was I going to call it? I didn't want to just call it the Amherst Pow Wow.
Yeah. Especially Amherst has a little bit of a
there's a history there.
Dicey history.
So I wanted to come up with something useful. And so I belong to a few Ojibwe language groups. And I started asking elders, what would be appropriate here? And they were like, let's just use Odenong. It would be where we are, where the community is. And even though powwow itself is a misnomer, powwow actually meant medicine person. What would happen is somebody would be like, see a group of medicine people over there, and they'd be like, what's that? And they'd be like, oh, powwows. And saying that's the group of people, and they're like, oh, that means the gathering must mean powwow. And so it's a misnomer. There's different words for it in different languages. So in Lakota, I think it's called Wachipi. Mi'kmaq, they call it Mawiomi. So, there's different words for what the gathering is. I wanted to, with the name, give it something with some weight behind it. It's where our hearts do gather, all of us.
The 4th annual Odenong Pow Wow is this Saturday and Sunday in the gymnasium of the Amherst Pelham Regional High School. The Odenong Pow Wow is free and open to the public. Vendors will be starting at 11 a.m. and dancing begins approximately at noon each day on both days.
The founder and producer of the Odenong Pow Wow joins us now, Justin Beatty, a multidisciplinary artist of Native American, Ojibwe, Saponi, and African American descent. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts from the University of Massachusetts with a concentration in Indigenous policy, culture, and art. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back to the show, I should say.
Yeah. And welcome back to the time of year where the powwow happens. What's changed from year 3 to year 4?
Well, we've been able to revise a lot of how we do things, right? And become a bit more efficient in selection of vendors, making sure that we're getting quality drum groups in, choosing our dancers, our head dancers and staff, being able to rely on the relationships that we had built previously to sort of make things run a bit more efficiently. We've been able to secure some really solid funding, as well as we've become a nonprofit under fiscal sponsorship through the Tiny Seed Project. And this allows us just to operate in a much different capacity. We can apply for funding from different places. It gives us peace of mind. This powwow was not created to be a commercial venture, right? It was created for me because I wanted to find a way to give back to a community that has been so kind and loving to me and had taken care of me and my family during difficult times. I started as an LLC just because I needed to have an operational bank account, right? And I wanted to be able to track that money versus my own personal spending.
Because otherwise your accountant yells at you.
Right. They come kicking my door in.
I need some limited liability for this thing.
Exactly. Being able to work with the Tiny Seed Project allows us to operate differently and have conversations with organizations and other businesses that might not want to have a conversation with just a standard LLC.
The list, apart from the Tiny Seed Project, of the sponsors who've made this possible is long and great. It's to show how much support. I think we probably talked years ago when the first Odenong Pow Wow was happening on my old show to see how much support has rallied around it. Has been really great.
It's been an absolute blessing to see that people understand what we're trying to do, creating a space for Native folks to celebrate their cultures and express themselves culturally without it being seen as like a gimmick.
Yeah.
Creating a space where non-Native folks can come and talk to us and experience, cultural values where they can ask questions, right? Because a lot of times TV shows and movies and books and stuff, they're well-meaning. They may even do their research really well, but they're only giving you a snapshot, and you may see something or read something, have questions, and have no one to ask.
Yeah.
Whereas here, the dancers, the singers, the head staff, they're all accessible, and you can walk up to folks and be like, hey, I have a question. And, I personally don't think there's any stupid questions. I think there's stupid people, don't get me wrong. We know them, we love them, some of us are them. But the question that doesn't get asked, that's where the problem is, right? I've been Native and Black all my life, so I've heard all the questions. I know when somebody's being genuine in asking, like when it's a real curiosity. I know that a lot of people have been misinformed about who Native people are. We've all been misinformed about ourselves and each other, right? Men have been misinformed about women. We've all been misinformed about people that are on various gender spectrums. We've been misinformed about race. We've been misinformed about culture. The way we break through that is by having conversations and putting ourselves in spaces together where the understanding from the jump is we're not here to argue. You have a question, ask the question. I don't ever want to make somebody feel bad about where they are in their education, right? Because we're all learning all the time. An event like the Odenong Pow Wow creates that space where we can come together and talk and learn, and you'll hear things that you might not otherwise hear and know. I'm happy that right now, media-wise, there's been a trend towards Native media that the narrative and the imagery itself is headed up by Native folks. So you have Reservation Dogs. You have
it is one of the best shows on television in recent history.
It's so
show.
good.
And I'm blessed to know Dallas Goldtooth, who plays Spirit, and McGizzy Pensano, who is one of the executive producers.
Oh, nice.
They're folks that I've created friendships with over the years. Years ago they came to UMass Amherst as part of their comedy troupe, the 1491s. And my drum group sang for them, and we just got cool and started hanging out and talking and stuff. But being able to see that there's this depth and breadth of indigenous-oriented media shaped by Native people is such a valuable thing. But people have been also taught that there's sort of this pan-Indian idea when there's so many different tribal nations, right? You have 574 federally recognized tribes, which means that the federal government says you're a tribe. You have another 60-plus state-recognized or state-acknowledged tribes. Then you have numerous groups of Native people living where they've always lived, operating as a tribe that don't have any formal government-to-government relationship with any sort of American government, but maybe have that with other tribes where the tribes themselves are saying, yeah, you're a tribe. To think that a TV show or a movie or a book is going to give you enough information about Indigenous people as a whole just kind of does a disservice. So being able to come to events like this, I think, is helpful in giving people sort of a little bit of a bigger glimpse.
We're speaking with Justin Beatty, who is the founder of the Odenong Pow Wow, which for the fourth time will be in Amherst this Saturday and Sunday. This time it's going to be inside at the gym at Amherst Pelham Regional High School starting at 11 both days.
There's a really interesting combination of both commercial, nonprofit, and academic sponsors for this. Has there always been that balance between academic and non-academic groups coming to support the powwow?
After the first year, yes. And the first year was a virtual event. It was awesome. I was able to get 3 drum groups, Iron River, who's our host drum, and my drum group at the time, Urban Thunder, performed. But then we also had the Lone Cry singers that are from Prince Edward Island in Canada. And so they streamed in and sang songs. But that was a labor of love, and it was my first real attempt at even trying to do anything of this nature. The second year, 2022, folks now understood what I was trying to do, and I myself had more time to refine my vision and my message. The educational component is just something that's always been a part of my life, and it's been a part of my work. Blessed to be able to give lectures and do talks at different schools and events for organizations and the like. So I always wanted to make sure that folks understood, we're welcoming you into our space, but we're not just going to let you in and not let you know what's going on. Some powwows, right, are open to the public, but are entirely for Native folks. If you don't know what's going on, you just don't know what's going on. And that's fine, because not everything is meant to be presented in a consumable fashion. But by the same token, I believe it's a benefit to give some insight into what people are experiencing to kind of help get rid of the erroneous beliefs and the misconceptions that folks have, where folks walk away feeling like they have not only seen something, but learned something.
Justin Beatty, who is the founder of the Odenong Pow Wow, happening this Saturday and Sunday in Amherst. What are some of the things that we will experience this Saturday and Sunday that we can learn from together at this free and open to the public powwow?
Well, there will be, first of all, there'll be music and dancing, traditional dancing, powwow-style dancing, and some of that has traditional and contemporary styles within it. There will be a demonstration of what's called Eastern social singing and dancing, which is the kind of singing and dancing that would have been done here in the Northeast when folks were just getting together to hang out. So we have Thomas Fantasia, who's from the Aquinnah Nation out on Noepi, Martha's Vineyard. He's going to come and sing some songs. We have a food vendor, Fry Bread Catering, that's going to provide different foods for us. So he's got what are called Indian tacos on fry bread. So it's kind of like, if you ever had fried dough from a fair, imagine that with taco fixings on top.
Okay.
Right? And it's very similar to that.
Love it.
So he's going to have smoked turkey. He's got venison. He's got vegetarian options. There will be several educational organizations there as well. So we have the Okateo Cultural Center, which is one of our partners and sponsors. We have the Institute for New England Native American Studies, which is based out of UMass Boston. We have Native American Lifelines, which is an Indian health services organization. So they help Native folks with, they can help you get your prescriptions. They can connect you with mental health services. They can get you appointments. They can get you to and from appointments. They have all kinds of stuff like that. We have Tides for Reproductive Freedom, which is an organization dedicated to, helping women obtain safe medical services. These are aspects that people don't necessarily think about when they think of Native people. Mm-hmm. They think drums, they think fringe, they think bells, they think animal skins. But we exist in all the places that everybody else exists, right? We're principals, we're pilots, we're sewer workers, we're cashiers, and we have the same needs: healthcare, shelter, food, clean water. Our approach may be somewhat different, right? Our experiences may be certain different, but we still have the same needs as everybody else. And then beyond that, we have a wide selection of vendors that carry everything from art to clothing to home decor. There'll be opportunities for folks to join in dancing. There'll be round dances. There'll be two steps, which is a couples dance. It's usually ladies' choice. The way it works is the head lady dancer will set a price. So what happens is, if you turn down a woman who asks you to dance, you have to pay her whatever that price is.
There's something about that I just love.
Yeah. Well, the concept of gender roles was very different for a lot of tribal nations, right? There's some that are matriarchal, so the women are the ones that own property, right? Like the Osage people in Flowers of Killamoon, the women were the ones that had the right to own property. Matrilineal, so you get your bloodline and your clan through your mother. Matrilocal, so if you got married, you went to live with your wife's family, right? Even among the Haudenosaunee people, the Iroquois people, it's the women, the clan mothers, that install the chiefs, and they can also fire them. European societies often had been patriarchal, so when they came here, they didn't really understand that wasn't necessarily the case, so they would only want to deal with the men in most cases. And so that sent some things into tailspin, because it was just some stuff that the men weren't familiar with, so they didn't know the value of it or how it operated for a portion of the society.
Just to bring back your experience as a visual artist, because you are a visual artist. You work in digital medium, like on canvas and oil and graphite. Are there things from your work that influence the way that you've put this on?
Yes. So I grew up in New York, in a place called Roosevelt on Long Island. Dr. J, Howard Stern, Public Enemy, Eddie and Charlie Murphy, Sandra Dee, they're all from my hometown. But I grew up to going to powwows and stuff in the city. So I was used to seeing some powwows in city settings, right? It impressed upon me the fact that, like, Native people are still here in these spaces along with everybody else. And so I could be in the city and see somebody in their regalia, and I'm like, oh, they must be heading over to the powwow, right? Mm-hmm. In some of my art, I reflect this, right? Like I have a jingle dress dancer in Times Square hailing a cab. I have grass dancers hanging out in front of a brownstone just chilling. A women's fancy dancer dancing in front of a bodega. Because, we have a right to be in these spaces too, regardless of what that space looks like. It helped me form this powwow in the sense that I also wanted folks to understand that powwows can happen anywhere and that there are Native people everywhere.
Justin Beatty, who's the founder of the Odenong Pow Wow. Its fourth incarnation this Saturday and Sunday for free. It's at Amherst Pelham Regional High School. Thanks so much for coming in again.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and love the show, by the way.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I haven't seen you in a while.
I saw you last week.
Well, briefly. Can I real quick?
Yeah.
I would like to shout out the Just Flow Fund, Ocotillo Cultural Center, the 5 College Consortium, No Loose Braids, Nolambika Project, Amherst Regional People of Color United, the Ron and Cheryl Welburn, the LeBeau family, all our head staff, all the powwow committee.
And a big shout out to our friend Cara Bayer, who couldn't join us today.
Yeah, Cara, she's awesome. Oh, and of course, the Tiny Seed Project.
Justin Beatty, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
You can find out more about the Odenong Pow Wow on their Facebook page.
Time to bring Jewish and Muslim children together to play soccer. We explore the journey of Daniel and Ismail, and the folks who helped bring that journey to our pages next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Daniel and Ismail is a children's book about a Jewish boy and a Palestinian boy who love soccer. Written originally in Spanish in Chile, where the largest Palestinian community outside of the Middle East lives, the book is trilingual in English, Arabic, and Hebrew.
Or maybe quadrilingual because it started in Spanish. I don't even know if that's a word. Daniel and Ismail don't know each other yet, but they have more in common than they know. They live in the same city and have the same birthday, and this year they get the same presents, a traditional scarf. For Daniel, a talit, and for Ismail, a keffiyeh. They both get a soccer ball as well, and taking their gifts out for a spin, they meet by chance on a soccer field, and they soon begin to play together.
The hope is that in these terrible times, efforts like this will bring people in dialogue. Also, that children's books like this can help present the conflict in a more age-appropriate way to a young audience.
What is the local 413 connection, you may be asking? Well, it's published by Restless Books in Amherst, and the English translation was done by Amherst College professor and one of the founders of Restless Books, Ilan Stavans, who joins us.
And we're also joined by one of the book's Spanish to Hebrew translators, Eliezer Nowodworsky, based in Israel. However, the Arabic translator and the other Hebrew translator were unable to join us.
Thank you for joining us, Ilan and Eliezer.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and we're talking to you in Amherst, Ilan, but we're talking to you, Eliezer, in Israel. Maybe before we start talking about the book, tell us how the situation is for you and where are you in Israel currently?
Okay, I'm based in Ramat Gan, which is 500 yards from here, starts at or ends Tel Aviv. It's a very small country. President Bush once said that in Texas we have roads that are broader than this country. Distances are not measured by American standards, but I'm about 50 kilometers from Jerusalem, which is 30 miles, and another 30 or 35 miles from Gaza itself.
I I think people sometimes lose perspective on the fact that I think all of Israel-Palestine landmass is about the size of New Jersey, even smaller than New Jersey. Ilan, from Restless Books, tell us about your decision to publish this. This was actually published in 2016, correct?
Correct. The book I encountered while traveling through Chile. It was in Spanish. I was at the Santiago Book Fair. I thought it would make a wonderful addition to the Restless list, and that we would do it in a way that hadn't been done in the original, trilingually, as the Khalid mentioned, Hebrew, English, and Arabic. It took a while to gather all the translators for translators that are on the opposite side of the ideological divide to agree to be on the same page, and that was the hardest challenge that we faced. But the book really made a splash when it came out, and of course, most recently with the horrific events that happened after October, it has gained a lot of popularity. Many readers nationwide and internationally, and the paperback just came out.
Is there any interest in presenting it like this in the original Spanish as well?
There is interest, Khalid. The idea would be to incorporate a fourth language because it's already in Spanish in Chile. The resistance has been that the pages would be too dense with text, but I think we're imagining a larger size book so that we incorporate all those languages that have been essential for the dialogue of the two sides. Because the diasporas, both the Jewish diaspora and the Palestinian diaspora, have a lot to say on what's happening in the Middle East right now.
We're speaking with Ilan Stavans and Eliezer Nowodworsky, who have translated this incredible children's book, Daniel and Ismael, into English and or Hebrew. It's also been translated into Arabic. I'm interested, Eliezer, in some of the feedback that you've heard from people who've read this book near to where you are in Israel and their take on the story of two young children from different backgrounds coming together and playing soccer peacefully.
Part of my frustration is that there was almost no feedback in Israel. Most of the feedback I had was from abroad. The people from Israel are committed, as I am, to dialogue and to peace initiatives. It's like preaching to the choir. So nevertheless, we commented several times that it must be read not as a Middle Eastern book, even if it is in Hebrew or Arabic, but as a Latin American book written in the original Spanish. And it makes a difference. So sometimes the cohabitation of diasporas in neutral places like the Americas or Europe is different than in the Middle East itself.
And Monty, I would add to that though we tried desperately to distribute the book in the Arab world to show the possibilities of a dialogue between the two sides, it was deemed politically charged by many bookstores because it had Hebrew, and so there was very limited distribution. My hope is that at some point in the near or far future, readers that are not only in English, but in Hebrew and in Arabic will be able to enjoy it the way the rest of us are.
I'm not necessarily surprised, but it is like a little upsetting. You think that it would have better reception if it had just stayed in Spanish with only English and Arabic translations?
I think that probably if it is one language, the vernacular, sell it in Arabic in the Arab world, sell it in Hebrew in the Hebrew, or in Spanish in Latin America, it will be a different ballgame, really.
Because, Carlos, I think the challenge here really is that a children's book is trying to imagine the coexistence of the two people by presenting the coexistence of the two languages as the first step. And we are in such a fraught, difficult time that simply having the text, Hebrew and Arabic, with English on the same page, regardless of the message, can polarize people.
Even if you were to take all of the languages away, I think the pictures speak an awful lot about what's going on in this book. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that people are having a hard time seeing the actual printed languages on the same page. But the story concept by Juan Pablo Iglesias Yasher and the illustrations by Alex Perez tell a story of these two scarves, these traditional religious scarves. Talk about the meaning behind these scarves and what it means when they bring the wrong ones back home, quote-unquote wrong ones, to their families?
I'll go one step back because you mentioned twice that I translated from Spanish, and it is true at the beginning, but later we did it from the English, which was the version which is slightly different from the original one. So we worked using the English version as the basis for both the Hebrew and the Arabic. The kafia is not religious. Different areas of the Middle East, they were a different model of kafia or hatha with different colors and sometimes a different setting on the hairdo. So it became a kind of national identity.
The one I'm most familiar with is the black and white checkered one, and I'm assuming that one means Palestinians.
The Palestinian one.
So what do the other colors mean?
Yeah, for example, the Jordanians use a red one with red patterns. In part of Lebanon and Syria, it's mainly green. On the other hand, the talit, yes, this is a religious thing. You start using that shawl on when you turn 13, and that's another point that it's different in reality than in the book, because these children are younger than 13, and for some reason he gets a talit, which is unusual. Even more unusual, you do not wear a talit if it's not in the synagogue. So you are not going to take it for a soccer game. Nonetheless, I loved the idea. And again, if you see it as a metaphor or only as a symbolic way of expressing identity.
More with Ilan Stavans of Restless Books in Amherst and translator Eliezer Nowodworsky about the book Daniel and Ishmael.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
We're speaking with Eliezer Nowodworsky and Ilan Stavans, who are two of the translators behind the book published by Restless Books in Amherst, Daniel and Ishmael, which tells the story of a Jewish boy and a Palestinian boy coming together over their love of soccer and the inadvertent political atmosphere that they get swept up in because of these scarfs that we have been mentioning.
Eliezer, what jumped out at you about this project? Why would you want to work on translating this?
There are several things. First, if Ilan asks something, you never say no.
We kind of know the feeling, actually.
It's just that he suggests such great projects.
He sure does. He knows what he's talking about.
So even before we started with the details, I knew I was already aboard. And when I read the book, I fell in love. First, he told me about the idea. I said, I want to read it now. If I want several copies of that book. Again, since I think that politicians can do a better or worse job, but peace and understanding, big words, come from the bottom up. You need the grassroots sprouting with things like, for example, sports or any other thing that bring people together. Seeing the innocent play by children, and I see it here, have a park nearby, only a 5-minute walk from here. I have a very large park. And sometimes in the playground, you see children about the age of Daniel and Ismail, some playing in Hebrew, some in Arabic, some in Russian, and they play together and they have no problem. When they grow up a little bit, then they split. But early ages, they have no problem in playing together, each one speaking his or her language and understanding perfectly one the other. Kind of miracle, but it works. So I knew that I have to do it. And by the way, the other Hebrew translator, Frida Presdanieli, she was the one that pointed, okay, let's not call him Ismael like in Spanish or Ismail like in English, but the Arabic way you pronounce it, Ismail. And that is very important.
Ilan Stavans from Restless Books, who translated it originally from the Spanish, that then got translated from the English into the Hebrew, as Eliezer has noted. Are there other nuanced differences that we may lose if we only know the English translation of this?
I think that the essence is all here. The title in Spanish is different. The title in Spanish is igual a uno, meaning they are tied in one. We thought that that was too much of a soccer terminology, so we put the names of the two characters, Daniel and Ishmael, in the title. But basically, it is the same book, again, trilingual in English. And the hope here is maybe quixotic, like my favorite hero, Don Quixote, to bring two people to be able to see their humanity, to go beyond their political differences and realize that there might be common elements that they share: soccer, cuisine, the beautiful evening landscape, whatever it might be, that we can go beyond the tensions that have been so balkanizing to many of us.
I think a small decision in the translation, though, and the presentation of the book was the one to keep it going from right to left, which is not standard for English-speaking audiences. Talk about leaving that instead of flipping the pages and making it easier for an American. God, I've got to stop that. That's not the language. The language is English.
I love the question, and I'm truly thankful, Khalees, for asking it. Because we inserted the other two languages, that is Arabic and Hebrew, the question immediately arises: how are we going to present the book if Hebrew and Arabic start from one end to the other, and English and Spanish start from the other end? So when you open a book, you open it from left to right, or you open it from right to left. And we wanted to pay tribute to that difference in the languages. So in a very unique way, this is a children's book that starts at the end of the book, but it's the beginning, as it would be in Hebrew or in Arabic. And there's a little statement that shows up right there that says, "Hello, readers. This book reads like Hebrew and Arabic books do, from right to left. You're at the beginning, so read on this way." And I think that is already an invitation for the little readers and for the adult readers, because every children's book has the two ages, the caretakers that read and the children that receive it, to feel that there's something different here, that it's coming from another culture, that we have to slightly move our imagination to perceive things differently. And I think that that's what a children's book from another culture should do, to introduce an audience to something the same but slightly different, and invite them to imagine the world from that perspective.
It might be the only hope that we have to unteach this kind of hate, to start so early, to get people to see their own mutual and shared humanity via the means of these wonderful picture books and via the means of different languages and ways of approaching these picture books. It's powerful. It makes me feel sad for us grown-ups, but gives me hope in the generation forthcoming that a book like this may help bring the kind of peace that I think we all are longing for.
Would either of the two of you like to talk about the Arabic translator, Randa Saya? She's very busy and wasn't able to join us, but it's such an important decision to have her be a part of this project, and might pose some problems to her being a part of this project.
Many translators and interpreters in the Arab world feel that even if they do share the willing of a dialogue or something, they feel that the time is not ripe for that, and it can cause them many problems in their countries.
Khalees, I would add to this that from the moment we signed up the book to the moment I finally found an Arabic translator, it might have been 18 months to 2 years. I tried various wonderful Palestinian translators who are friends of mine, translators also that live in Lebanon, that live in other parts. They all loved the book, but they thought it would be, in the words of one of them, almost suicidal to be part of a project at this point that has the Hebrew and Arabic languages on the same page for children. And so they very respectfully declined, until I found Randa Sayed, a first-rate translator who lives in Jordan, who has done many projects and who jumped on the idea and had the courage and the vision to do it. Every time I have an opportunity, I pay tribute to her and celebrate her. In a moment like this, even in a children's book, it takes a lot of courage to go beyond the nearsightedness of the moment and imagine that the two languages can open up two civilizations sharing much more. And so it's hats off to her for having said yes.
Ilan Stavans from Amherst and Restless Books, who have published this incredible children's book, called in English Danielle and Ismail. Ilan, one of the translators, as is Eliezer Nowodworsky, who joins us from Israel, right outside of Tel Aviv. Thank you for taking this risk and putting this out into the world to move us towards a place where we can be more peaceable with one another and see how much more similar we are than we may remember on a day-to-day basis.
And on a very basic level, for folks of a young age to become multilingual, because that's also a really good trait that this book is teaching us to encourage.
Muchísimas gracias.
No. We don't want people to become multilingual. Translators have to make a living as well.
Noted.
Tomorrow, Chris Smither joins us for Live Music Friday.
And a history of Memorial Day with Dr. Usman Power Green.
And a Vermentino Wine Thunderdome at Table and Vine. Thank you so much to the Fabulous 413 Tech Team.
We will see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
Go out there, be fabulous.
Here's Chris Smither to wet your whistle.
He's so good.